Good morning. This is the November 15th, 2023 meeting of the Baltimore City Board of Estimates. It is now called to order. For those who are attending with us today in person, we please ask that you silent, if not turn off your electronic devices so you do not disrupt today's proceedings. And for those online, if you are able to participate in today's discussion, we will ask that you unmute yourself, state your name, organization that you come from, and then present your testimony or presentation. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our amazing clerk, Ms. Celeste Amato, for any additions, corrections, and noted abstentions from today's agenda. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. This morning, we have the following changes and corrections to note. On September 6, 2023, the board approved SB 23-13150. The renewals for this item were omitted from that submission, and the board is asked to insert new language into the background information for that item. This award includes 2 one-year renewal options exercised at the board's discretion, and the written record will be corrected to reflect those words. Also on September 6, 2023, the board approved SB 23-13730. There was an error in the amount approved, so under amount of money and source of funds, please strike $29,041.90 and insert $29,254.29. We have received the following statement of support this morning for item SB 23-14224, Department of Recreation and Parks, surrender of possession of recreation centers. A statement of support has been received from Ms. Kim Trueheart. We have the following withdrawals to note this morning. SB 23-14109, Department of Transportation, Amendment Number 1 to agreement with Romo, Klepper, and Cowell for Project 1323. This item is being withdrawn at the request of the agency. And SB 23-14164, Department of Finance, Baltimore City Public School System Capital Improvement Program, fiscal years 2025 through 2030. This item is also being withdrawn at the request of the Law Department. The following items are on the non-routine agenda this morning. SB 23-14056, Bureau of Budget Management Research, transfer of funds, carryover of unexpended appropriations. SB 23-14137, Law Department Separation Agreement and Release. SB 23-14096, Department of Planning, Baltimore City Public School System Capital Improvement Program, fiscal years 2025 through 2030. SB 23-14141, Department of Public Works, consent decree with the Maryland Department of the Environment and Blue Water, case number 121CV03176. And SB 23-14224, Department of Recreation and Parks, surrender of possession of recreation centers. Again, this item is on the non-routine because a statement has been received. We have the following abstentions to note this morning. The Honorable Mayor Brandon Scott is abstaining on the following items. SB 23-11692, Health Department Grant Expenditure Ratification. Johns Hopkins Medicine Bayview Medical Center Division of Infectious Disease, Integrated Viral Hepatitis Surveillance and Prevention Funding for Health Departments. And on SB 23-13787, Health Department, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, I Want the Kit. The Honorable President Nick Mosby is abstaining on the following items. SB 13-14121, General Fund Supplemental Appropriation of $12,300,000 Health Department, Service 315 Emergency Services. SB 13-14121, General Fund Supplemental Appropriation of $1,300,000 Board of Elections. SB 13-14121, General Fund Supplemental Appropriation of $12,300,000 for Health Department, Service 315 Emergency Services. SB 13-14124, General Fund Supplemental Appropriation of $1,900,000 Law Department, Service 860 Administration. SB 13-14121, General Fund Supplemental Appropriation of $12,300,000, Health Department, Service 315, Emergency Services. SB 13-14126, General Fund Supplemental Appropriation of $300,000, Liquor License Board, Service 850. SB 13-14119, General Fund Supplemental Appropriation of $18,900,000, Fire Department, Service 602, Fire Suppression and Emergency Rescue. SB 13-14127, General Fund Supplemental Appropriation of $300,000, MR Cable and Communication. SB 13-14130, General Fund Supplemental Appropriation of $400,000, MR Office of Children and Family Success, Service 109, Administration. SB 13-14121, General Fund Supplemental Appropriation of $12,300,000, Health Department, Service 315, Emergency Services. We have the following abstentions to note for the Honorable Comptroller Bill Henry. He's abstaining on the following travel requests: SB 23-14139, 23-13936, 23-13129, 23-14214, 23-14213, 23-14215, 23-14034, and 23-14094. Again, those were all travel items. Acting City Solicitor Ebony Thompson has no abstentions to note this morning, nor does the Director of Public Works, Mr. Richard Luna. We have the following no votes for the routine agenda to place on the record this morning. The Honorable President Nick Mosby will be voting no on the following items: SB 23-13820, Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs, First Amendment to Grant Agreement with Job Opportunities. SB 23-13853, Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs, Grant Agreement with the Baltimore Museum of Art. SB 23-13951, Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs, Grant Agreement with the United Way of Central Maryland. SB 23-14072, Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs, First Amendment to Grant Agreement with Keys Empowers, Inc. And SB 23-14073, Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, Greenmount West Community Center Foundation. And that concludes our opening statement for this morning, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. At this time, I'll entertain a motion for us to adopt the opening statement.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The opening statement has now been adopted. I now would like to direct the board's attention to a memorandum from my office dated November the 14th, 2023, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items together with corrections, additions, abstentions, and no votes that have been noted by our amazing clerk. I will entertain a motion at this time to adopt all the items in the routine agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The routine agenda has been adopted. Now, as we turn into the non-routine agenda, the first item is on pages 5 through 7. It's SB 23-14056, Department of Budget. This request is to approve carryover of unexpected appropriations in fiscal year 2023. On behalf of the Department of Budget, we have
Good morning, Board of Estimates members. Laura Larson, City Budget Director, here today to present on this item, which is part of a package related to closeout budget actions associated with moving from fiscal 23 into fiscal 24. Based off of unaudited figures, the city's general fund finished fiscal 2023 with approximately a $91 million surplus. SB 23-14056 is a request to carry forward unspent funds within agency budgets. The purposes of those appropriations are also outlined in the BOE memo. It is important to note that this item is part of a broader package associated with our closeout action. The routine agenda today also included 8 supplemental appropriation items that will that seek to increase the appropriation for agencies that ended fiscal 2023 with a deficit. Following the board's approval today, those items will be introduced at the City Council for their review and approval before they are enacted. I do just want to note that there will be one additional supplemental that we've identified that we need to bring forward for fiscal '23. That item will also require city council approval, and we're aiming to bring that item to you all as part of your next BOE agenda. So I'm happy to take any questions regarding this item.
Thank you, Madam Director. Just for the record, a carryover is not necessarily a supplemental appropriation, right?
That's correct.
Right,
That
but
is
there is one additional supplemental that we expect to take up on the city council, you just mentioned, right?
That is correct.
Right. And just for the general public's knowledge, could you explain exactly what a carryover is, how it's created, what that means?
Yep. So a carryover would be bringing any unspent appropriations from the prior fiscal year into the next fiscal year. So a number of the items that are included in the recommendations this year are associated with timing lags. So let's say an agency had appropriation for a contract that was part of their fiscal '23 budget for services that were rendered in fiscal '23. But let's say the city received the invoice after we moved from fiscal '23 to '24. We are carrying forward the funds from the prior year so that they can properly fund that invoice.
Thank you for that explanation. And what's the actual process for finance to determine if they're going to approve an agency's request for carryover?
Yes, so once we get through our preliminary closeout actions, which take place at the beginning of July, after we've passed June 30th, we will entertain requests from city agencies for them to identify areas where they need to carry forward funds. Those items are then reviewed and vetted by the Bureau of Budget and Management Research. We prepare recommendations that we then review with the city administrator in order to finalize the package of recommended items that we bring forward to the Board of Estimates.
So some agency requests are denied.
That is correct.
And typically, what are the reasons for denying an agency's request for carryover?
The primary reason that we would utilize is intent of the funds. We really try to ensure that we're carrying forward funds that were appropriated for their original use. So if there are instances where people are trying to carry forward funds that are inconsistent with the original appropriation, those are items that generally end up on the no list. We also ensure these are one-time surplus funds that are coming forward, so we want to make sure that we're not allocating those costs to recurring costs that would create a structural deficit moving forward in the city's budget.
Understood. Now, if there is a denial, what happens to those funds?
So in some, we're also not able to grant requests for everybody because, some agencies end up higher, some agencies end up lower. We have to be in balance in the overall general fund. In the instance that we're not able to approve a request from an agency, agencies are notified of their requests, what is approved and what is denied. For those items that are not approved, we would work with, if they are a need that they need to address, we would work with them to identify how we could fund that program or initiative within their existing appropriations, or we would, look to identify, how else we could address that need without outside of the carry forward process within their existing budget.
Thank you. At this time, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Just wanted to provide the general public all the amazing work you do and all the stuff you know.
Wonderful.
You're the subject matter expert.
Thank you.
With that, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. We will now move on to next non-routine item on the agenda today, and that will be found on pages 124 and 125, SB 2314137, Law Department. This request is to approve the separation agreement and release of Shane Watkins. On behalf of the Law Department, we have...
Good morning, Mr. Council President, Mr. Comptroller, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. Stephen Salisbury, Deputy City Solicitor. This settlement agreement arises out of an incident that took place originally in July of 2018. An individual came into one of the city's community action partnership or CAP centers seeking energy assistance. that individual was ultimately the victim of a sexual assault at the hands of a city employee. The individual left at the office after the encounter and immediately made a complaint with the now former employee's supervisor. That touched off an investigation by DHR. Once that investigation was begun, the employee decided to resign in lieu of termination, and several years later, the plaintiff, the survivor of that sexual assault, filed a complaint against the city alleging sex-based discrimination, sexual assault, and a number of other tort claims. The backstory to this is that the former employee had at least two prior incidents where he had been the subject of investigations for similar misconduct, neither of which resulted in the employee's full separation from the city. In 2009, there was an investigation by the Department of Human Resources, and the employee was terminated. However, as a civil service employee, he was able to challenge that termination, and through that process, his termination was ultimately overturned because a corresponding criminal action the criminal charges were dropped against him. In 2016, there was a separate incident involving that same employee and a custodial worker. DHR began an investigation, but again was unable to substantiate the initial allegations because the accuser had declined to participate in the investigation. The former employee was recommended for training and had certain access restricted in terms of his access to the premises, but there was no other evidence to ultimately substantiate further disciplinary action. So in light of the fact that there had been earlier warning signs, and even though they were investigated, all allegations were fully investigated, the employee was not ultimately separated from the city, and then later on we had this incident in 2018. And after the 2018 incident, once the employee had quit, there was at least one additional incident that came forward that the city learned about. The city law department is recommending a settlement in the amount of $225,000 to resolve this matter. I'm happy to take any questions.
I think one big point while we talk about this is that this took place in 2018, so 5 years ago. I guess, where we are today, from an HR perspective, has anything been changed? Do you think that this was avoidable back then? How do we ensure that this type of behavior by a city employee is not allowed to persist, and for any best practices or things that are in place today?
So I think that it's important to note that even as early as 2009, each time there were allegations, the city did conduct a full investigation of those allegations. I think in both of the prior incidents, and unfortunately as is often the case surrounding allegations of sexual harassment, you have a survivor or a victim who is does not want to participate in that investigation for completely understandable reasons. However, without that participation, it can be very difficult to then substantiate findings. And again, particularly with a civil service employee, they're entitled to certain protections where the city is not able to take disciplinary action, even something like a demotion, which could be considered a disciplinary action, without being able to substantiate findings. Now, there were remedial steps that were taken. First of all, back then and today, and even back then, all new employees are given training around sexual harassment. Managers are also given training around how to spot that type of sexual harassment. There's other remedial steps taken, like putting signage around office spaces about how to report this type of misconduct. But again, in this instance, this was a case where you had, two prior incidents that were ultimately the city was not able to move all the way forward with with the disciplinary process, and unfortunately, this this former employee was able to carried out another act of sexual violence. I think that again, the Department of Human Resources, it's important to note just that every one of these actions was fully investigated, within the limitations that we discussed about, if a witness is not willing to participate in the investigation. But there are, there were remedial measures taken then, and there are a number of steps in place today to prevent, while I think no system is perfect, I think that, there are a number of steps in place to prevent this type of misconduct from happening and from happening again.
And I guess with the first case, because the criminal charges were dropped, that's why the city felt the need to, I guess, retain employment of the individual.
Yes, that's our understanding, is once the criminal charges were dropped, the employee's termination was ultimately overturned.
So ultimately, this wasn't avoidable.
Well, I think
Not from an employment status perspective.
no. I think that our in terms of the employment and the disciplinary process, I think we feel that was followed the way it should have been. I mean,
Got
of
it.
course, something happens 7 years later, you're going to look at it and say, well, I wish maybe we would have. But there are important protections in place for employees, particularly for civil service employees, and we feel that process was followed. But that, again, that doesn't mean that there's not risks, and there's not risks associated with, moving forward with litigation here, and that's why we're recommending the settlement.
Thank you for that explanation. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. So I wanted to check out two things. First is, and I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this, but would this case be a sufficient reason for us to try to improve in any fashion the policies we have in place for allowing the general public and for coworkers to report any type of suspected concerns? Do we have a one-stop shop? Do we have a one place that people call if they, saw their coworker do something inappropriate, or a member of the public saw a city employee do something inappropriate to them or to someone else? Is there like one defined place that people call for that?
So I think that there's maybe not one specific place. I mean, obviously, employees can report that conduct to their managers, their supervisors. I know the Department of Human Resources has a number of resources that are available for reporting this kind of misconduct. I don't have, we could get the answer on sort of what the specific hotline and tip line is and make sure that that's flagged. But I know that is posted on signage, and our understanding is that was also posted on signage at that at this location. And again, it's important to note that this immediately after this event took place, the individual, the resident who was the subject of this harassment, was able to immediately report that to the individual's supervisor, and that's what touched off the investigation immediately, which ultimately led to the employee separation.
And then the second line I'd like to pursue, and this is, I want to disclaim, I don't think that the city did anything wrong here. What I'm asking is, going forward, is there a change that we could make to our own policies, or a change that we could request in law that would allow us to go after a former employee for, like, we're about to pay out $200,000 plus because this employee did something wrong. We've had many conversations about if former city employees are found guilty of doing various things, can we go after their pension, especially if the city incurred some type of financial loss because of their action. What I'm wondering is, in this particular case, the complainant, the victim of the sexual assault, came after the city because they could not go after the employee directly, or just because we're an easier target?
Well, no, and the plaintiff did go after the employee directly, and they served the former employee and ultimately got a judgment against the former employee. So it was both the former employee and the city that were defendants in the case. The former employee has, after this incident has not been able to be located, we believe he's been out of state. We were not able to take his deposition through this process, but he was also the subject of one of the plaintiff's claims in the case. In terms of changes to the policies, I think that again this is this becomes something more of an HR DHR question, but I think that my understanding is certainly the city is always reviewing its policies to see if there's improvements that can be made. I think that employees, again, particularly civil service employees, have protections in place that are entitled to due process. And again, this tension between victims and survivors and a completely understandable preference not to participate in an investigation, and the difficulty with then being able to substantiate allegations, that exists certainly in the criminal justice system. It's something that also is going to exist in the employment system. But I think that here, that's just something, there were additional steps taken, even though the employee, the city could move forward with disciplinary action, like, requiring training, changing their access, moving, finding out ways to limit their interactions with the public.
In this type of situation, what I'm looking at less is how to, it's less about what could we have done to try to prevent this person from doing what they did. From the details that I've been briefed on, I'm not sure any amount of training would have been sufficient. But what I'm more concerned with is there was sufficient evidence, as it were, in this particular case to make the city comfortable with settling it rather than letting it proceed to trial. And what I'm wondering is, in that type of situation, would there be a way for the city to then turn around and file a civil suit against the former employee to try to, I mean, I understand what you said, that the victim already also got a judgment. And the likelihood is there's probably not going to be enough there to satisfy two completely, but shouldn't we be, just as a matter of, course, also holding them accountable after the fact? That just in this case, they were terminated, but is simple termination sufficient in terms of holding them accountable for the fact that they have now not only committed what they've done, but on top of what they've done, they've also cost the city $225,000? Yeah,
I mean, again, I think it's important to note, we are settling this case. There were allegations against the city, and not just, I think in a sense, what we're paying out is not just for what the former employee did, but it's for the city's culpability in, failing to catch this in the first place. And again, while our point is certainly that, I think looking back that, we felt that the city investigated all these claims and looked into all of them. There are still risks inherent in litigating this type of case, particularly given a lot of the other things that were discovered after the fact, after this employee left. The other, I think, important to that question that you're asking about whether we could hold the former employee liable, there's going to be a question about whether this was occurring in the scope of his employment. And unfortunately, given the details of this case, obviously what he did was not part of his job description, but it was very much occurring while he was, he was in a position, the position that he was in because of the nature of his job in terms of providing, energy assistance and requiring individuals to come into the office, meet with them one-on-one, talk about their, their personal financial situation. So I think that all those were the types of risks that might make it harder. But again, I would say we're certainly always looking at ways that we can make sure that the real costs of this type of misconduct is, is not just held by the city. I mean, again, in this specific instance, because of the types of allegations and claims that this plaintiff filed against the city as a defendant, I'm not sure that that would have worked, but we're, always open to looking into that.
Okay, thank you.
And Shane Watkins is the employee's name?
Yes, it's, no. That's the plaintiff's name.
What's the employee's name?
It's Gary Smith. There's a former employee.
Former employee Gary Smith?
Yes.
And what department did he work in?
So it was actually a different department at the time. I believe at that time, it's now known as the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, which I think it changed names later. I think it was at that time the Mayor's Office of Human Services, but it was the city's CAP Center, the Community Action Partnership.
I would just say, for the record, moving forward, if we could ensure that for incidents like this, that we always include the employee's name in the record. Obviously, we have the victim or the plaintiff's name, but I think it's important just for full transparency and for this process that we include the name of the former employee, as we do with police officers. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Salisbury. Two quick things. One, to your point, Mr. Comptroller, after we got the briefing on this, we've already directed Director Herbert to look at our sexual assault policies for any updates to the policy that we would need to make. We obviously know this took place quite some time ago. And Mr. Salisbury, that's my question is, why did it take from 2018 until 2023 for us to, that seems like a long time for someone to have to deal with that kind of trauma?
So the plaintiff actually didn't file the claim until 2021, until almost 3 years after the incident. Our understanding is that during that time, in those 3 years, the plaintiff was trying to find the former employee, and that may have been part of the reason for the delay. But that was that was up to the plaintiff. There's a 3-year statute of limitations, so that's probably why they ended up filing it in 2021.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. The next item on non-routine agenda can be found on page 170, SB 2314096, Department of Planning. This request is to note the operating and capital budget plan for Baltimore City Public Schools. On behalf of the Planning Department, we have
Hi, Director Chris Ryer.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. On October the 12th of this year, the Planning Commission approved the Baltimore City Public Schools Capital Improvement Program for fiscal years 25 through 30. Their request must be approved by their Board of School Commissioners, the City Planning Commission, Board of Finance, and the Board of Estimates. The local share becomes part of the CIP, and the local share is currently fixed at $19 million per year in GO bonds. The request prioritizes a number of projects in the system, and Maureen Gersberg is online to answer any questions about that. But you may know that I believe Furley and Faring are under construction now. Armistead Gardens is teed up northeast a little beyond that. And then longer term, both Benjamin Franklin High and Edmondson West Side High are scheduled, as well as systemic improvements like HVAC, windows, doors, roofs, et cetera. That's all I have for today. If you have any other questions, again, Maureen Gersberg is on from Baltimore City Public School System.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Do you want to turn it over to someone online? Is that what you were?
Correct. Maureen Gersberg.
Ms. Gersberg, you
morning.
have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Maureen Gershberg. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning and Real Estate for Baltimore City Public Schools. As Chris introduced, we are asking for approval for the most recent CIP proposal. The majority of our funds for capital programs comes from the state. So for the CIP program, the systemic projects and major projects covered by the state have a deadline of the fall. And so we try to work simultaneously both with our local funds and with the state funds for that process. We typically receive between 35 and 46 million from the state, and then we historically have received 19 million local funds from the city. And as Chris said, that goes to cover multiple systemic projects such as roofs, windows, doors, HVAC, as well as major projects such as Furley, Marigi Fairing, Armistead Northeast. We are putting in requests for Ben Franklin and Edmondson. They haven't been approved yet, but they are included in the request for this year. And so we are requesting approval for that 19 million.
Thank you. At this time, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
It's just noted.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. We just have to note acceptance of the school system's capital budget plan, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Director, as well as Ms. Gershberg. Next up, the next item on non-routine agenda can be found on pages 236 and 237, SB 23144141, Department of Public Works. This request is to approve an agreement and release with the Maryland Department of Environment and Blue Water Baltimore. On behalf of DPW, we have...
Good morning, honorable members of the board, honorable mayor, Comptroller Henry, President Mosby. Today, DPW is asking this honorable board to request a consent decree that was negotiated between the Maryland Department of Environment, Blue Water Baltimore, and the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore City. On and about August 23rd, 2021, the city received MDE's compliance and enforcement letter to DPW regarding the city's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, i.e. called the NPDES permit. Immediately thereafter, the mayor directed the newly DPW director, Dr. Mitchell, to coordinate with the city's finance department to issue emergency procurement authorizations to hire contractors and consultants to assist the city in addressing these violations. About a few weeks later, on September 7th of 2021, DPW responded to MDE's alleged MDE's violations with a spreadsheet of the root causes and next steps to resolve them. On September 17, 2021, DPW submitted to MDE a strategic plan to address the violations via immediate short-term and long-term action plans. In late September, early October of 2021, DPW, Blue Water Baltimore, and MDE began discussing the violations and the possibility of a consent decree. However, on December 15th of 2021, Blue Water Baltimore filed a citizen suit against the mayor and city council regarding the wastewater treatment plants, which is the Back River Wastewater Treatment Plant and the Patapsco Wastewater Treatment Plant, regarding its compliance of its NPDES permit. On January 21, MDE then filed a complaint against the city regarding the same violations regarding the two plants, which is the Patapsco wastewater treatment plant and the Back River Wastewater Treatment Plant. In November of 2023, the parties reached an agreement, which is recently, concerning the terms of the consent decree regarding the wastewater treatment plant, which the terms would include, but are not limited to, Blue Water Baltimore's attorney's fees of $400,000 because of Maryland law. Blue Water Baltimore citizens are able to file citizen suits against violators of our state regulations regarding our Clean Water Act and Safe Drinking Water Act. In addition, we agreed to a penalty of $4,750,000 will be broken up in three parts. 30% of the penalty, which is $1,425,000, would be tendered to MDE. Another 30% would be held in abeyance. In the event that the city is compliant for 2 years, we won't have to pay that $1,425,000, and we have to be compliant for 2 years. And then finally, 40%, which is the remaining $1,900,000, would be tendered to the Chesapeake Bay Trust for supplemental environment projects regarding in our surrounding communities to address any environmental issues that may have caused during that period of time. In the violations, MDE asserted that these violations stem from 2017 until about 2023. However, during the time of negotiating with the respective plaintiffs, since the summer of 2022, DPW performed the following activities to to maintain compliance with the Back River and the wastewater and the Patapsco wastewater treatment plants, which includes but not limited to dewatering 18,146 dry tons of sludge, which is human waste. We hauled out 160,000 wet tons of sludge, which is equivalent to Arundel County's yearly production of 6 plants. We procured well over $200 million in contracts with respect to consultants and contractors to ensure that our plants are compliant with the consent decree. In addition, the plants have increased staffing initiatives to hire key personnel that was missing. Part of this issue was during the period of time between 2017 and today, which is a national issue. There have been staffing shortages in our plant. We had issues regarding our ransomware attack that happened in 2019. In addition to there was a loss of key leadership and key personnel that were able to direct then to ensure that the plants are operating in a compliant manner. During this period of time, we were able to hire a chief of environment and regulatory compliance and safety division. And the purpose of that chief is to ensure that we're compliant with our federal, state, and local laws regarding our compliance requirements. If you may know or not know, every morning at 8:30, our director, Richard Luna, meets with all key personnel within the organization, which we call collaborative compliance. We work with the staff to ensure that we troubleshoot and address issues immediately before they rise to a level which our regulators will be involved, to which we will go down the same road again. So this is a mitigation and prevention division to ensure that we have our own internal controls and checks and balances to ensure that we're not compliant again. We've hired a biosolids manager, a health and safety manager, and a training manager. We've hired a chief technical officer for the Bureau of Water and Wastewater to provide technical expertise as our regulations get more stringent over the years. If you're aware of PFAS and other regulations that are coming down the pipeline, we've hired a technical officer to kind of get us above the curve before these regulations come down the pipeline, to ensure that we have the technical expertise in the operations to be able to handle those type of regulatory requirements in the future. We've hired a process engineer, and that's I highlight that because I'm a process engineer, and in these type of operations, you need key process engineers to help us to optimize our efficiencies and effectiveness, ensure that we're not going down this road again. In addition, we've outsourced our solids handling operations and maintenance at the Back River wastewater treatment plant, Jacobs, to mitigate our staffing shortages. And many utilities across the country are doing the same thing, and that's a 5-year contract to ensure that we're handling our solids and treating them appropriately, and then discarding them as required. In addition to the consent decree, we are required to do about 50+ injunctive relief actions, such as rehabilitating our egg-shaped digesters. If you're familiar with the big dome egg shapes, to rehabilitate and repair that, which would be an $88 million investment. With that, the Department of Public Works asks this honorable board to approve this consent decree to resolve this civil litigation between the Maryland Department of Environment as well as Blue Water Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to note, and before I go into this, I want to be very clear. I am not supportive, or I have not been convinced to be supportive of this aspect, but I know that there's many folks around the state, around the region, and even some folks inside of city government that is interested in moving in a direction to a regional water authority. Again, in the past, I've constantly spoken out about my concern of city losing resources and assets. Obviously, the biggest thing that we always talk about is the loss of Friendship Airport, which is now Thurgood Marshall Baltimore Washington International Airport, and what that would mean to revenue in the city at this point. Many folks on the council took up the issue with us not selling, but kind of moving in loss of operational control of our conduit system to Baltimore Gas and Electric. And now we go down this path of folks trying to entertain the idea of a water authority regional. My question is, as we continue to, if that is the momentum, and again, I want to be very clear that I'm not supportive of the city of Baltimore losing any additional assets or resources, particularly as it relates to infrastructure. But if that is the momentum, when is there going to be a calculation by city government to ensure that all the money that we're putting into a system that the regional authority, if that is to happen, would adopt, that somehow the taxpayers of Baltimore are provided an opportunity to either claw back the money or provided some level of equity associated with all that we're putting into the system. Obviously, that's not a question for you to answer today, but as we continue to see these very large dollar amounts that we have to earmark and that we have to assign and distribute to a water system that folks have the momentum to take away from cities' full control, I just question the strategy of where we are. So from a Board of Estimates perspective, definitely want to talk about it. I don't know if we can talk about it today, Mr. Mayor, but just wanted to bring that up as we go down this path of another consent decree agreement. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'll say that both the comptroller and I should update you separately about the water task force. But just so that you know, the first thing that we asked the comptroller to make very clear, myself and the county executive on the first meeting of the task force, was that this asset will remain owned by the city government, that there was no option on the table for that not to happen. But we'll be sure to update you on all the other things, because those are things that the comptroller and I have discussed and other members of the task force ad nauseum at this point. Oh, I have other questions for Donnell, but I didn't know if Mr. President. Oh, yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, and also for the viewers at home, the next meeting of the Regional Water Governance Task Force will be tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. It is a virtual meeting, so it'll be available online. But what I was going to say is the next meeting after that isn't scheduled until January. So my hope/expectation would be to find a time in December when I could come back and address the council and sort of catch the council up on where we are with the proceedings of the task force.
Yeah, again, as we talk about kind of with the conduit system, it's not just us retaining ownership, but it's also us we're losing full autonomy of the operations of it, right? So ownership is one thing, particularly as it relates to, liability and risk, but it's also another thing as it relates to from an operational procedural perspective. So definitely interested in speaking with where we are with that. But again, just as we continue to see these really large dollar amounts go into a system that we are particularly maybe be on the cusp of losing full autonomy and control over, that's what I would like to talk about. And I think that we have to do it in a more open and transparent fashion. Not that anyone's been trying to hide it, but I think it's a very complicated situation. I think that there's many folks at the state level, many folks outside of Baltimore that kind of have their own position, but I think it's really important that we continue to kind of brief it. So maybe what we'll do is maybe call for a city council hearing. We'll allow members of the public to come out and really hear, I guess, where we are, next steps, the direction of the administration, and where we're going to go. With that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to that point, I would again agree with the comptroller that we would allow all the folks to participate in the task force hearing. That's why we had the comptroller and the crew schedule so many of these publicly, because this is not just about retaining the asset, but also us finally getting to a point where, quite frankly, our partners around the region, that we make sure that they're putting in the same weight that we're putting in, that the city's not pulling all the weight consistently and being the ones that bearing the bad news, right? Well, everyone else has to be at the table. This is about making sure that the region is supporting this system that we regionally work with to make sure that everybody is putting in their weight to the system, and we're going to make sure that happens. I have no doubt about that. But to this, I want to start Mr. President, by thanking Director Luna, former Director Mitchell, Mr. Ingram for their great work, all the people at DPW, our great workers at DPW, thank our partners at MDA and Blue Water Baltimore, because this really is an important turning point for the Department of Public Works. We know Mr. Ingram mentioned 2017, but all of us in here know that we're talking about much longer disinvestment at Back River and Patapsco than 2017 that got us to this point. And we've been working alongside our partners at MDA to get to this point, and we've already seen significant progress. As of June 2022, as he mentioned, Back River has performed at or below the permitted levels. Patapsco has been complying with this daily, weekly, and monthly effluent limitations since September of 22, and I think the most important thing that you're going to hear me say is that this summer, Patapsco had his lowest on-record affluent, lowest ever. Since we've been tracking it, that's the kind of work that has happened and been invested in the DPW. Yes, the $15 million that we put into making sure we get the right staff. This is how we started to modernize these facilities, get them the people, get the practices and the policies, the systems that they need to now have the treatment plants putting out their lowest numbers ever on record to make sure that we're protecting our natural assets and treating our water in the right way. Thank you.
With that, are there any additional, Mr. Comptroller?
Well, just a comment. My office had a briefing on this previously, and I asked the General Counsel if he was able to take that briefing and synopsize that down into just 3 or 4 minutes in front of the board, and he assured me he could, and so I wanted to take this opportunity to congratulate him for an incredibly detailed and informative 3 to 4 minute presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Any additional questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing and seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. Next up on our non-routine agenda, thank you. You can find it on pages 251 and 252. That's SB 2314224, Department of Recreations and Parks. This request is to approve the surrender of possession agreement between the Department of Recs and Parks and the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. On behalf of the Recs and Parks, we have.
Good morning. My name is Nicole Green, Deputy Director of Administration for Baltimore City Can you guys hear me now? Nicole Green, Deputy Director of Administration for Baltimore City Recreation and Parks. Good morning, Honorable Board. Baltimore City Recreation and Parks would like to surrender the possession of 5 facilities to Baltimore City Public Schools. Baltimore City Schools is currently operating in these facilities. These 5 facilities are Liberty Recreation Center, Leith Walk, Gardenville, Callaway, and Barclay. Barclay and Leith Walk, we have not been operating those facilities for years. Liberty, we will turn over the possession of the facility to the schools, but we will maintain possession of the pools. Barclay is currently being operated by the 29th Street Community Center, and Gardenville, we're going to surrender that one to the school, but we're also building a brand new recreation center separate from the schools. If you guys have additional questions, Maureen Gershberg is also online from City Schools, and she can give further information if you guys have.
Thank you. Are there any questions or concerns for Recs and Parks of the school system? I see, Mr. Mayor, your hand raised.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Deputy Director. I just want to point out, Mr. President, that I think that this is a big improvement on the relationship between Baltimore City Schools and Recreation Parks. I know you know very well that
No more MOUs.
over the many years, there's been a lot of back and forth, and I want to give credit to the director, the deputy director, the school CEO, and her team about trying to finally push them to work through all those issues so that we can actually do what's best in the interests of our young people. But then, just in case no one heard it, right? I just want to make sure that for number 3, that there is still going to be a Gardenville Rec Center. It's just going to have to happen to be built bigger and brand new. If you've ever been to the current Gardenville Rec Center that's inside of Hazelwood, it is very, very small. It's basically an art and craft room and a makeshift skating rink, and that's it. We're now going to be building a state-of-the-art facility on the same property. Will not move or be relocated other than 10 or 15 feet. So I think this is a great thing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Comptroller?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to check in. The former Leith Walk Recreation Center was renamed several years ago the Kenneth N. Harris Senior Community Center. And I understand that the Leith Walk as a school runs a Head Start program or lets it out to be a Head Start program. My concern is whether the school system will continue to allow that space to be a community center evenings, weekends, during the summer, the times when it is not being used as a Head Start center.
Okay, I'm going to turn that over to Ms. Maureen to answer that for you.
Good
Ms.
morning.
Gershberg?
Yes, so anyone who wants to use our schools right now are able to go through the permit process. So there's no, even if Head Start is in this space, there's other spaces within the schools that are available for community use. And that's written into our policies.
So is there any way to put Ms. Gershberg on screen? Because I saw her briefly when, yeah, there we go. Hi, okay. I understand that the schools and school property in general is available on a permit basis, but in this case, we're specifically talking about a space that historically was very community-oriented, and are there any additional efforts that can be made on the part of the school system or the individual school to promote the fact that that space is available for community use when it is not being used for Head Start?
We can certainly look into that. I know that, I believe Head Start is, I can check, but I thought it was year-round, and typically in those types of spaces, it's outfitted with like tiny chairs and tiny tables, so it's not the most versatile of spaces. But I know that, again, we also do try to include like the community spaces in our new schools, so we can certainly look into how we can better communicate the access to that community.
So Head Start is using the entire space of the community center?
I can verify that, but that's what I believe.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
In full disclosure, I played Baltimore Neighborhood Basketball League at Leith Walk. That was my basketball rec center. Are there any additional questions or concerns from the board?
Just as waiting.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I was just waiting to see if the mayor was going to talk more trash about when you were in the basketball league.
No question. Thank you so much. At this point, we do have a letter of support from an amazing community member. Whenever this person is here, the board always is excited and provide the opportunity to speak. She's an amazing Baltimorean who cares immensely about our young folks, so much so she sacrifices on a daily basis. She's been doing that for as long as I've been in public service, so we thank you so much, Ms. Trueheart. If you could please talk to us about Liberty Rec Center.
That was very kind of you. As a citizen and resident, I've been operating Liberty for the past 11 years. And I want to make sure it continues as a resource for our community. Monday, I was floored by the number of people waiting for vegetables to be delivered. It was about 100 people out there, and they look forward to the things that we offer the community. I'm hopeful that we can continue it. We've been working with the school system to update the infrastructure. DOT just came out and redid our sidewalks so they're handicap accessible. I want to thank Ms. Faith Leach for that. We're having a visit from the school system today to look at the bathrooms. It's wonderful. I put in funding requests totaling $200,000 for improvements, and I'm hopeful that we can get those underway. The only question I have about this transfer is, does it include the toddler pool, which is next to the regular pool? And it does not?
I don't believe so. Yeah, the Recs and Parks are retaining all the pool system, including the Tyler pool.
I'd like to revisit that and make sure that the area where the toddler pool is located is our exit. It is enclosed in this fenced area, and we use that fenced area. The toddler pool is inoperable. It has been for some time. It's another thing that I'm working on, getting funding for improvements. I'd like to really discuss it. Can I have a copy of the transfer agreement?
Yeah, we can definitely make a copy available to you. It should be online soon also.
Okay. Well, those are my concerns, but I truly support the transfer, and am thankful that it finally happened.
Well, we're thankful for you and definitely bringing this to us today. I know the comptroller, the mayor, and myself, we will take your concern at heart. Obviously, you're a subject matter expert of Liberty Rec Center, so we understand and know and appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Trueheart. With that, at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. Madam Clerk, I believe that wraps us up today. Is that accurate?
That's correct, sir.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. As there's no new business before the board desk, we will adjourn. The next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Estimates will occur on Wednesday, December the 6th at 9 a.m. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in and coming to participate. Baltimore, we absolutely love you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Estimates bid opening for November 15th, 2023. I'm Celeste Amato, clerk to the Board of Estimates, and I'm joined by our amazing team that organizes these bid openings every other week or so. First, today I need to share an addenda received from the Department of Public Works for contract WC 1326. This is for an acronym, SCADA, SCADA, I don't know if we ever say that, SCADA/DCS Water Facilities Design. The due date was originally today, but that bid will now be opened on December 20th, 2023. We have 5 bids that we are opening today, and first up is for the Department of Transportation. It's contract TR 23013. And that is ADA curb ramp construction, various locations citywide.
So we have J Villa Construction, Inc. This does have a bid bond. And that total is 2,606,000.00.
So remember how last week I kept having that the number 6 problem? I think my keyboard won't always read it when I push the button. So I'm going to confirm that bid amount. That was $2,606,000, 0 cents, from J. Villa Construction, Inc.
That is correct.
And do we have any other bidders, or was that our only?
That was our only bidder.
That was our only bidder for contract TR 23013 ADA curb ramp construction at various locations citywide. Up next, for Department of Public Works, we have contract SC 1029, urgent needs improvements to Baltimore City sanitary sewers in various locations, Zone 1.
We have one bidder for this item. It is Spinello. Okay, and this item does have a bid bond.
Thank you.
Okay, that total, that total is 14,773,300.00.
Okay, that number was $14,773,300.00.
That is correct.
And that bidder was Spinello. Is that our only bid?
Yes.
That was our only bid for contract number SC 1029, urgent needs improvements to Baltimore City sanitary sewers in various locations, Zone 1. Up next, we have a bid for Department of Public Works, WC 1408, substation SSA SSB replacement at the Montebello Water Filtration Plant 2.
Our first bidder for this item is the Whiting Turner Contracting Company, Incorporated. The total amount for this item is 9,197,000.00. Yes, we have a bid bond for this
Okay,
item.
that number was $9,197,000.00.
That is correct.
And that was the Whiting Turner Contracting Company, Inc.
Up next, we have Glenelg Construction Incorporated. That total amount is 7,568,375.00.
That number was $7,568,375.00.
Yes, and we do have a
And
bid
that was for
bond.
Glenelg Construction.
Correct.
And you said there was a bid bond.
Yep.
And was that our final bidder?
Yes.
So that was our final two bidders for WC 1408 substation SSA and SSB replacement at the Montebello Water Filtration Plant 2. Up next, for Bureau of Procurement, we have RFQ 000428 Caterpillar Heavy Equipment OEM Parts and Service.
We have no bid submitted.
We have no bids submitted for RFQ 000428 Caterpillar Heavy Equipment OEM Parts and Service. Up next, and our final bid for today, is also for Bureau of Procurement, RFQ 000439, OEM and aftermarket parts, supplies, and services for heavy-duty vehicle and equipment.
Our first bidder is American Truck and Equipment.
And I believe these are itemized, so we won't be sharing totals because we can't. They're itemized bids. So we will run through the list of bidders again at the end so everyone is clear on that list. But that first submission was from American Truck and Equipment.
That is correct. Up next, we have Patriot Fire LLC.
That, again, was Patriot Fire LLC.
Up next, we have Mid-Atlantic Waste Systems.
That was Mid-Atlantic Waste Systems.
Up next, we have Baltimore Freightliner Western Star.
That was Baltimore Freightliner Western Star, and I believe their bid also indicates they do business as Harbor Truck Sales.
Up next, we have Valley Supply.
That was Valley Supply.
Up next, we have Middleton and Meads Company Incorporated.
That bidder was Middleton and Meads Company, Inc.
And our final bidder for this item is Columbia Fleet Services Incorporated.
And that final bidder was Columbia Fleet Services, Inc. Okay, I'm going to run through that list for folks who are keeping track. Again, this was contract RFQ 000439 for OEM and aftermarket parts, supplies and services for heavy-duty vehicle and equipment. And the bids received, which again are itemized, not totaled, so we are only sharing the name of the bid of the bidder. Those bidders are American Truck and Equipment, Patriot Fire, LLC, Mid-Atlantic Waste Systems, Baltimore Freightliner, Western Star, also doing business as Harbor Truck Sales, Valley Supply, Middleton and Meads Company, Inc., and Columbia Fleet Services, Inc. And that was our final opening for today. As always, bids are referred to the agencies for their review. And we will have the results of today's bid openings posted on our website by close of business, if not sooner. And our next bid opening is December 6th, 2023. Thank you, Audrey. The last month of the year is always a blur. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you on December 6th. Thanks, team.